headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and it's time for your Week 18 injury update show. You guys know the deal. Every single week of the NFL season, I go through the entire NFL slate, tell you about all the injuries that you need to know about for your fantasy teams, and it's time, guys. I mean, it is the last week of the NFL regular season, week 18. I cannot believe we're already at the end of another great fantasy season. If you haven't already won your fantasy championships, hopefully you're watching this. Hopefully I can help you guys take these chips home for Headliner Nation. But let's get into the week 18 injury update show, as always brought to you by our friends over at Fantrax. Appreciate them sponsoring the injury show this year. Head on over to the Fantrax app in your app store, download it, let them know that the Headliner sent you. But let's get into it. Week 18 injury update show with the doc. All right, guys, before we get into the week 18 injury updates, I just want to take a few minutes here and just talk about the situation that happened with Demar Hamlin. Obviously, here at Headliner Nation, we are wishing Demar Hamlin a very speedy recovery. If you're into praying, I hope that you guys are doing that for Demar Hamlin. If not, just sending positive vibes to his family, to the Bills, to the Bengals players, team, staff, the medical staff. Situations like that are very, very scary. As somebody who has worked on the sidelines of many football games, that is a worst case scenario, nightmare situation for the training staff of a team. Now, that being said, I did not hop on Twitter. I did not hop on a video and immediately start speculating about what was going on with Demar Hamlin. I find that in situations like that, my personal philosophy is to let's wait and see what happens with this before we just go speculating and just throwing out information at the people. So if you were upset about me not dropping a video that night about what I thought was going on, I'm sorry. It's just not my style personally. I don't like it when injury analysts go out and just start speculating about things that could or could not have happened on the field in that exact moment. Now, if you're a member of the Discord, if you're a member of Headliner Nation, join the membership down below. Get access to that Discord, because I did go into that Discord and we did have a conversation, what I consider a professional conversation about what I thought it could or could not be going on with that situation. So if you want access to me for those types of situations, or if you just want to join that conversation that goes around year round, make sure that you're joining the membership, Headliner Nation YouTube membership. Get access to that Discord so that you can have these types of conversations with us, because I did do some, not speculating, but just hypothesis driven analysis, what I thought could be going on in the moment. But let's talk about what actually did happen. So we know that Demar Hamlin made a tackle on T. Higgins, got hit in the chest, and that caused a cardiac event. Now, we don't know the exact state of if there was any underlying conditions that may have predisposed him to that, if there was something else going on. All we know is that after that hit, he did have a cardiac event where his heart did stop and they did have to resuscitate him on the field. Obviously, very, very scary situation for everybody watching, for the teams, just everybody there. That is really a worst case scenario, that somebody's heart stops while they're playing football. Now, the good news is they were able to successfully resuscitate him. And let me tell you, as somebody who has done CPR, that is an amazing feat, and just an incredible amount of relief goes over you when you actually are able to successfully perform CPR, because it is a scary, scary thing, and it is intense when it happens. That's why when you saw players just leaving that huddle and just being absolutely just their face, their just horrible reactions to that, it is a terrifying thing to see CPR happening in person. Even worse when you're actually doing the CPR. Scary, scary thing. But he was able to be resuscitated. They did have to intubate him because he was not breathing on his own. But the good news is reports now are saying that he has woken up. He is able to communicate via writing. He's still intubated, so he can't talk as of this recording, but he is cognizant of what happened that night. He knows, who he is. He knows what, that he's a player for the Bills, that they were playing a game and that he got hurt. And he is asking questions via writing about that game, which is a huge, huge deal when we're talking about recovery from a major cardiac event. The fact that his brain is intact enough and cognizant enough to be able to ask those types of questions right away is a massive step in his recovery. I am not going to speculate on when Damar Hamlin's going to come back, if he can come back, if he can play football. So please don't ask me questions like that in the comments. I'll answer a lot of questions, but I'm not going to be able to just speculate on a guy's health. I'm not evaluating him. I'm just telling you what we know about that situation and what I know about that situation now from reports that we've gotten from Damar Hamlin, from his agents, from just like the people around him. So again, I'm not treating Damar Hamlin, so please don't ask me when I think he's going to be able to play football again. But the good news is he is making very, very quick recovery from this major, major event, life-threatening event, and we are sending all of the positive vibes that we can to his family. If you want to, he does have a charity that he's raising money for. A lot of people have donated that. You can find it online. Go ahead and head over there and leave a donation if you want to. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but just if you want to, if you feel compelled to do that, I do encourage those types of things. I made a donation. I know that a few guys in the headliner chat on Discord also made donations, so we appreciate those guys as well. But just wanted to take a few minutes here, talk about that situation. If anybody has any questions not related to anything that I wouldn't know about that situation, let me know in the comments down below. But let's get into it. Week 18 injury update show, the actual updates. Let's go. All right, guys, let's talk about the Week 17 accuracy recap. So we're going to start just like every other week with how I did last week, just to let you guys know that I am holding myself accountable. Even on the last week of the season, I'm still looking back, seeing how I did, trying to improve for you guys over at Headliner Nation. Last week was a good week, 92% on my in-out calls, 90% on the year overall, so I'm pretty happy with that number. Hoping to keep that number above 90% for this week, but we will see. I did have some misses last week. A few guys that I was surprised that they played, John Bostic, Jordan Poyer, Christian Watson, who did technically play even though he only had 1.6 half PPR points. A couple guys that I was surprised that they sat. Colt McCoy had concussion symptoms return on Friday. Because I record on Thursday nights, I did not know that was going to happen, so he ended up sitting. And then Adore Jackson needed another week despite practicing all week, so I was surprised by that. A couple misses from a fantasy perspective. I said that I thought David Montgomery could have a big day. He had a horrible day on the ground, only 24 yards on 6 carries. And then Mike White, I thought would be a quarterback 2 last week. He finished as the quarterback 31, clearly still feeling the broken ribs. But I did have a lot of hits last week, and hopefully if you had your fantasy championships, you took some advice that I gave you guys last week. I said that Justin Fields was going to have a big rushing day against that defense, finished with 132 yards on the ground, but didn't play amazing overall, but still 132 yards from a quarterback is a fine day. Told you guys to start Isaiah Pacheco. He started off really great, but the Chiefs running game wasn't really firing, but he still finished as the RB18, 11.9 half PPR points. Good for RB18 on the week. We're happy with that. I think that if you started Isaiah Pacheco, you are not kicking yourself. So I'm going to take a win there. Ramondre Stevenson, I told you guys that he was a risky start based on some things that he had going on. I don't know if anybody actually sat Ramondre Stevenson, but if you did, you were rewarded only 6.1 half PPR points last week. Told you guys that Brian Robinson was going to have a lot of volume, but not really going to give you a lot in terms of production. He did exactly that. Had 24 carries, but only 87 yards rushing, no touchdowns. So a lot of volume, but no real production on the ground for Brian Robinson from a fantasy perspective. Told you guys to start Taysom Hill. He finished as the tight end 6 with 13 half PPR points, was second on the team in carries, 14 carries on the week for Taysom Hill, with Alvin Kamara banged up, dealing with a few things personally, Alvin Kamara. So big week for Taysom Hill. Told you guys to start Amari Cooper. He finished as the wide receiver 3 on the week, 22.5 half PPR points. Also told you guys that the prize pick play of the week was Chris Godwin, over 69.5 receiving yards. He finished with 9 catches and 120 yards. So big day for him, and really just a big day for the offense, which I'm not going to lie, I kind of willed into existence. I knew my boy Jake was going to be live at this game to see Tom Brady and the Bucs. The vintage Tom Brady coming back, finished as the quarterback one on the week, 432 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, even ran for a touchdown. Huge week for Tom Brady, and I should have put some more money on this offense as a whole. Mike Evans also stealing the show, wide receiver 1 on the week, 207 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I'll just take full credit for Tom Brady becoming an absolute beast in the last week of the season. The team is finally healthy. His offensive line, most importantly, is finally healthy, which giving him some time to link up with Mike Evans deep. So hopefully you guys were starting Tom Brady in that matchup. I really did think that we were going to have a big week from him, but that's all I got for the accuracy recap for week 18. All right, guys, let's head into the matchups of the week. No Thursday night football, no Monday night football this week. All the games on Saturday and Sunday, 2 games on Saturday. The early game, Chiefs at the Raiders. Chiefs deal with a few injuries. Wide receiver Mecole Hardman has that oblique strain, now has a pelvis injury, has been practicing in a limited capacity, and does still appear to be in line to play this week after being officially activated from the main roster. He's not really worth starting in fantasy, but at least know that he is back. Wide receiver Sky Moore dealing with a hand injury, sat out week 17, has already been ruled out for this week. And then kicker Harrison Butker dealing with a back injury, DNPs on Wednesday. Did practice in a limited capacity on Thursday, but the team does expect him to play, but keep an eye on roster moves. Andy Reid brought up and actually said that they may call up somebody prior to the game. So keep an eye on the Chiefs if they're making any moves at the kicker. Might be an indication that they are planning on sitting Harrison Butker, or at least not letting him kick as often as he normally would. As for the Raiders, they don't have a whole lot going on, but wide receiver Devontae Adams has been sick, was listed all week, but back-to-back full practices. I think he's going to be able to play. Not worried about him. As for Josh Jacobs, he's got hip, oblique, and then non-injury related rest this week. Has not practiced in 2 straight days. Very concerning. I'm a little worried about the 2 DNPs, especially being related to a non-injury reason. I'm wondering if Jacobs isn't having kind of a mini holdout at the end of the year to try to avoid playing in this game with the anticipation of his free agency coming up. If he plays, I think he's fine to start, but I think there's more than just an injury going on here for why Josh Jacobs is not playing. I would not be surprised if he sits. Heading over to the Saturday night game, we got the Titans at the Jags, our first real playoff important game in terms of playoff seeding. We'll talk a little bit as we go along on which teams do have to play, guys. I know week 18 is a tricky week to have a fantasy championship in, but there are people out there playing fantasy championships, which is why I'm still here doing injury updates. The Titans, though, wide receiver Treylon Burks dealing with a groin strain. Not what you want to see if you're a Titans fan. Burks went from not listed to limited to a DNP this week in practice with this injury. He's going to be a game time decision, but his history is working against him. I would be surprised if he actually played through this. Running back Derrick Henry had a hip injury. We'll see if that was actually an injury. I don't think it was. Last week, definitely hurt a lot of people who had fantasy championships in week 17, but he is expected to be back and playing in full, and if I had to guess, he's going to get about 40 carries in this game. As for the Jags, really pretty healthy overall. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence is still dealing with a toe injury, but it's just maintenance at this point. He has been listed with this injury for about a month and has not missed any games. He's probably going to end up being a top 20 quarterback just because this is one of the very few games that really matters for the playoffs. Both teams are going to be trying to win, so I do expect Trevor Lawrence to be startable for fantasy. Moving on to the Sunday early slate, we got Bucs at the Falcons. Bucs offensive tackle Donovan Smith has been dealing with a foot sprain. He's been on the report for the last month with this foot injury, but managed to play last week. Unsurprising, the week that both Smith and Tristan Wirfs come back, the offense explodes. When this offensive line is healthy, this is a totally different team, but he hasn't practiced yet this week. He's a game time decision. Because I just don't know if the Bucs really need all of their stars playing in this game. Could they give him a week off? They're going to make the playoffs in either way, but I think they do want to win this game. So they're also dealing with a few injuries on the defensive end. We got cornerbacks. Carlton Davis has a shoulder sprain. Logan Ryan has a knee injury, both expected to miss this week, as is Vita Vea dealing with the calf injury that's cost him a few games. He's unlikely to play as well. The Falcons overall pretty healthy, just don't have really much to play for. Well, I will see. I don't think they really have anybody that's worth sitting just for the sake of keeping them from getting hurt. I don't think they really have any star players that I'm worried about them sitting. So Cordero Patterson, Tyler Algier, I think those guys are going to play in this game. And I'd be okay with starting them in my fantasy matchups if I had to. Moving on to the Patriots at the Bills. Pats wide receiver Devontae Parker, dealing with that concussion, is finally back practicing after missing 3 weeks with the concussion, but has not officially passed concussion protocol, so he's a game time decision. Wide receiver Jacoby Myers dealing with a shoulder sprain. New week, new injury for Myers. He's just been hurt all year. He's solid when he's healthy, but it's hard to say that we've seen that much at all this year. He's been limited. He should still play, but I'm not starting him for fantasy purposes. As for the Bills, quarterback Josh Allen dealing with ankle and elbow injuries. The elbow issue has been going on for about half the year, but the ankle injury is new, so it's worth knowing. He was limited on Thursday. I don't think this is going to stop him from playing, and if he's playing, I think you still have to start Josh Allen. You won't find it on the injury report. Obviously, the team is dealing with the mental aspects of what happened with Demar Hamlin. Same thing with the Bengals. So I can't really give any information on how specific players are handling that situation. Some players are taking it harder than others. T. Higgins, I know that he's not a Bills player, but I know that he is one that's taking it exceptionally hard and has been, he was pretty worked up about that situation. So I can't say that we're going to see totally locked in games from the Bills and Bengals players this week, but just know that we could see some abnormal performances either on the good end or the bad end based on what happened on Monday night. It's not going to show up in the injury report, so there's not much info about how specific players are handling it, but just know that we could see some wonky things going on with those two teams. Moving on to the Vikings at the Bears. Vikings center Garrett Bradbury has been out for a while dealing with the back injury. He's not expected to play. And then the Bears have already sat quarterback Justin Fields with a hip strain. Already been ruled out. Nathan Peterman will fill in for you. And if you start him in your championship, you get whatever you get from that situation. I would not be doing it. I'd be finding another option before I started Nathan Peterman with anything important on the line. Moving on to the Ravens at the Bengals. Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson dealing with that PCL sprain. Gosh, I keep screwing that up. It should be sprain, not strain. Strains are muscle, sprains are ligaments. Jackson not practicing. Do not expect him to be able to play. Cornerback Marcus Peters dealing with a calf strain, has been limited in back-to-back days, should be able to play this week after missing a few weeks, as should defensive end Calais Campbell, dealing with a knee sprain, is back practicing. The Ravens don't necessarily need to win this game, neither do the Bengals, but there are some playoff things at play depending on who wins this game. It will affect some other seeding later on when we talk about that. So the Bengals, really one of the healthiest teams in the league right now. Only 2 players on the injury report, nobody missing practice yet. Defensive end Sam Hubbard was dealing with the calf strain, back practicing in full. Really find themselves really, really healthy heading into the playoffs. Hope they can keep it that way as they play the Ravens this week. Perhaps the least exciting game of the week, Texans at the Colts. This really only matters for draft pick perspective. So this game is important. If the Texans manage to win, they could potentially win their way out of the number 1 overall pick. If that's not a Texans things to do, I don't know what is, but if the Texans manage to win this game, they could potentially cost themselves the number 1 overall pick. I just think that's crazy. They don't really have much going on as far as an injury perspective, mostly because they just don't have very many fantasy relevant players to even talk about. As for the Colts, cornerback Kenny Moore was placed on IR last week. His season officially over, has not played in over a month, so I'm not sure why they didn't just do that a month ago. Quarterback Nick Foles, dealing with the rib contusion, isn't expected to play this week after being absolutely crushed by rookie Kayvon Thibodeau. Sam Ehlinger will start for the Colts, best to just pretend that this game doesn't really exist for fantasy purposes, but it is going to be maybe one that you earmark afterwards, after the week's over. Maybe I should go back and see how that affected the draft standings for next season. Moving on to the Jets at the Dolphins. Jets offensive line is really banged up. Offensive tackle Dwayne Brown has a shoulder sprain. Guard Laurent Duvernay Tardif, Dr. Tardif, and George Fant all dealing with injuries, all in danger of missing this game. That's 3 offensive linemen that started last week that could be out this week. And then safety LaMarcus Joyner is dealing with a hip injury. He's already been ruled out for this week as well. As for the Dolphins, a lot of players on the injury report, 16 to be exact. Quarterback Tua Tagovailoa dealing with the concussion, not practicing. And I'm not going to lie, I am a little concerned about Tua's just overall health, long-term health. He's had a lot of major injuries happen to him. I think back to Andrew Luck and the situation that he went through. Could this be a situation where Tua does not manage to have the longevity in his career that we were hoping that he would? I'm worried about it. Don't expect him to play this week, even though this game is important for the Dolphins. They need to win. As for them, quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, their backup, dealing with a finger dislocation, left Sunday's game, but is expected to play. No official word on who the starter will be, though, him or Skylar Thompson. Offensive tackle Teron Armstead dealing with toe, pec, knee, and hip issues. Finally broke down enough to need to miss a game last week. He's a Warrior. True game time decision again this week, but he has not been practicing, so we'll see what happens with that. And then wide receiver Jalen Waddle dealing with the shoulder sprain, has been limited all week. I still expect him to play. I'm not sure how I feel about him and just the Dolphins offense as a whole if Skylar Thompson's starting. But I still think that based on how few games we have that actually have major playoff implications that are going to be played really competitively, I think you still can feel pretty good about starting Jalen Waddle. He should get enough run to be worth starting. Moving on to the Panthers at the Saints. Panthers don't really have anything to talk about injury-wise. The Saints have 2 tight ends dealing with some issues. Taysom Hill dealing with a back injury. Juwan Johnson dealing with a quadricep strain. Both those guys have been limited in practice, but I expect both of them to be able to play. If for some reason one of them sits, though, the other one is pretty much locked into a tight end 1 week. But if they both play, I still think they're both pretty okay starts. They've gotten enough run that you can trust them in your fantasy championships. All right, moving on to the Browns at the Steelers. The Steelers need a win to potentially make it into the playoffs. Browns offensive tackle Jack Conklin dealing with an ankle sprain, has not been practicing this week, looks unlikely to play. This could spell disaster for the Browns as the Steelers need a win to stay in the playoff hunt, and they are going to be trying to do that on the back of their defensive line. So being down an offensive tackle, not great for the Browns. And then cornerback Denzel Ward dealing with a shoulder sprain, also unlikely to play this week. He has not been practicing. I think we could see a big day from Deontay Johnson or Pat Freiermuth because of that injury. As for the Steelers, safety Minkah Fitzpatrick is dealing with an ankle sprain, landed awkwardly on his ankle while making a tackle, now seems on track to miss this game. So we're not going to have Minkah Fitzpatrick for the Steelers defense. They do struggle to tackle at times. That's not going to be helped by linebacker Miles Jack, also dealing with a groin strain. We'll see what happens. He's one of the few linebackers that the defense has that kind of consistently tackles okay. I'm not going to say the Steelers are a great tackling team. We saw the Ravens beat them up with J.K. Dobbins last week. Not horribly. They did get enough stops to actually win that game, but we know that the Steelers defense is vulnerable to a good rushing attack. and they have Nick Chubb coming in. The Browns want to kind of stick it to the Steelers. I think the Browns really feel like they can win this game. They're playing actually pretty decently, and I think that Nick Chubb is going to absolutely crush the Steelers defense. So head on over to Prize Picks, use the code Headliners, get $100 first deposit match, and use that money to bet a little bit of something on Nick Chubb. Even if you had your fantasy championships last week, you can still hop onto Prize Picks, use that code Headliners, get that deposit match, and have a little skin in the game for these Week 18 games. I think Nick Chubb's going to have a big day. His over-under is set at 75.5 rushing yards. I think that's a little low. I think he easily goes over 100 against the Steelers defense. So I'm taking the over on Prize Picks for Nick Chubb, even though it is against my Steelers, and I really do hope that they win. All right, heading into the midday slate, we got the Giants at the Eagles. Giants don't really have much to talk about from an injury perspective, but the Eagles have a lot of questions. First up, we got quarterback Jalen Hurts dealing with the SC sprain. The Eagles need a win for a chance at the 1 seed and home field advantage, and Hurts is practicing again in a limited capacity. I think we could see him actually return and play this week. I expect him to play this week to try to win that number 1 seed and get that home field advantage. I think the Eagles really feel like they need that advantage. I could see the team pulling him a little early for Gardner Minshew, so we will see what happens depending on how that game goes. If you have him in your fantasy playoffs, you're probably still starting him, because if the team is playing well enough to where they can put in Minshew for the second half, that means that Jalen Hurts has already done his job and scored enough fantasy points for you to win a championship. Defensive end Josh Sweat has a neck injury, was taken to local ER during the game as a precaution, so it's unlikely we see him this week. And then cornerback Avonte Maddox dealing with the turf toe. Offensive tackle Lane Johnson dealing with a groin strain. Both of those guys are expected to sit this week as well. Moving on to the Cowboys at the Commanders. Cowboys running back Tony Pollard is dealing with a thigh injury. He is back practicing in full after sitting last Thursday's game. He should play and isn't expected to be limited in this game, so I'm okay with starting Tony Pollard. It's hard to believe, but there is a scenario where a win for the Cowboys would not only win them the NFC East, but if Philly and San Francisco lose, the Cowboys could actually get a first-round bye and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So this is a game I think they're going to be trying to win. As for the Commanders, they've already said that they plan to sit multiple starters, but also start young players to see what they have. And so I think we're going to see a lot of starters miss. Both Antonio Gibson, running back, dealing with foot and knee injuries, has already been placed on IR. He's done. And Brian Robinson, with a knee injury, are expected to sit this week. So no starting running backs for the Commanders. Jarrett Patterson may be a guy that if you're really desperate for somebody you know is going to get some run, he might be a guy that I'm looking at potentially to start. We'll see who they actually name as the starter. But defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, Cam Curl, their safety, linebacker Jamin Davis, all those guys are expected to sit as well, even though their injuries normally would not have them sitting. Moving on to the Chargers at the Broncos. Chargers, no major injuries on the report, but the team has said that they plan to limit their starters' reps. So what does this mean from a fantasy perspective? I think it applies most to running back Austin Eckler. Now, you're still going to start Austin Eckler regardless. We learned that last week. Even if he's banged up, you're starting him. But he did come out and admit in an interview this week that he is beat up, he is hurting, and he is probably expected to not carry a full workload like he normally would, because the Chargers are already going to know before they start this game what happens with the Ravens and Bengals. If the Ravens lose, the Chargers will already have locked themselves into the 5 seed, and they could potentially sit lots of players from this game. So if you see the Ravens losing, or if they're about to lose, keep an eye on your Chargers in your lineup, because they could be a surprise sit, and I don't want you guys losing fantasy championships off of technicalities like this. As for the Broncos, they're pretty beat up. They don't have a lot to play for. 15 guys on their injury report. Wide receiver Jerry Jeudy dealing with an ankle sprain, has been limited all week. but they don't have anything to play for. I would not be surprised if the team sits multiple players regardless of their injury status. And then tight end Greg Dulcich, dealing with a hamstring strain, was placed on IR late last week, so he is done for the year. Heading over to the Rams at the Seahawks. Rams defensive lineman Aaron Donald dealing with the ankle sprain, not practicing. He's not going to be playing in this game. We've known this for a while. Aaron Donald not going to be able to come back during the regular season. The Rams do not really have a whole lot to play for except for the chance to ruin the Seahawks' dreams. And I think that that's enough for them to at least play some of their starters. Cam Akers, I think, will get enough run. Same thing with Baker Mayfield. If you really need a dart throw at quarterback, he might be one against a bad Seattle Seahawks defense that could be worth starting. Tyler Higbee, same thing. So I do think that they're going to play their starters. We'll see how competitive this game really is. As for the Seahawks, they need a win. They have to have one. They need some other things to go right for them, but they need a win to make it into the playoffs. They have 17 players on their injury report, though, so they are limping into the playoffs if they make it. Wide receiver Tyler Lockett dealing with a broken finger and the new shin injury. Had surgery a couple weeks ago. And so now he's not practicing. I think he's going to be a game time decision. Wide receiver Marquise Goodwin has shoulder and wrist injuries, was placed on IR last week. He's done for the year. And then two running backs, DJ Dallas dealing with an ankle sprain, Kenneth Walker dealing with illness and an ankle injury as well. Not practicing yet this week. Both are going to be game time decisions for Sunday's game. Heading over to the Cardinals at the 49ers. Cardinals have 18 players on their injury report. Let's be honest, Cards have no incentive to win or even be competitive in this game. Wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins has a knee injury. He's already been ruled out for the week. Quarterback Colt McCoy has a concussion. He's already been ruled out for the week. A few other players that I don't think are going to play. Running back James Conner, defensive end Zach Allen, linebacker Zaven Collins, all dealing with different injuries. I don't think that they're expecting them to play. And I wouldn't be surprised if guys like Marquise Brown, J.J. Watt also sit in this game, despite them being limited in practice. I just don't think the Cardinals have really any incentive to try to play a competitive football game against the 49ers. As for the 49ers, they could rest multiple starters and still probably win, but technically they do need to win this game. So I could see a situation where the starters play a half for them to get a lead, and then they sit them after that. Because if for some reason they were to lose and the Vikings, who are playing the Bears and are expected to win, they could drop into the 3 seed. The 49ers are currently sitting in the 2 seed. They could drop into the 3 seed. But if they win, not only will they avoid that situation, but they could even grab the 1 seed and home field advantage if the Vikings and the Eagles both lose. So if the Eagles lose, the 49ers are looking for a way into the 1 seed. So we still have some drama here with the 49ers, even though this should be a game that they absolutely steamroll the Cardinals. This is still an important game. So they're going to be playing semi-hard, at least for half this game. Playing semi-hard, that's probably not a sentence that I should say in the channel. Please don't make that a meme of me saying that. Thanks. Appreciate you guys. But if you want to look good semi-hard, use Manscaped. Head over to Manscaped, 20% off and free shipping when you use the code headliners, so that you're looking pretty good. If you're, semi whatever, let's just move on. As for the 49ers, wide receiver Deebo Samuel dealing with knee and ankle sprains, appears to be getting healthier, but came out this week, said he's only coming back if he's 100%. I doubt we see him if that is the case. As for running back Christian McCaffrey, knee and ankle injuries, not practicing, but he's been limited in practice for most of the year. I still expect him to play. The team has also opened the practice window for Elijah Mitchell, so that's just worth knowing. Last time Elijah Mitchell came back, he cut severely into Christian McCaffrey's workload, but I don't actually expect Elijah Mitchell to be cleared to start on the main roster this week. All right, moving on to the last game of the week. We've got the Lions at the Packers, and this Sunday night football game is one that I think everybody should be watching because the Packers need a win to inconceivably make it into the playoffs. Lions don't really have any injuries to talk about. The Packers, though, Aaron Jones dealing with knee and ankle injuries, has been kind of hit or miss this season, but is expected to play in this game. And then Christian Watson dealing with a hip injury, has fallen off the heater that he was on in the middle of the year, but he's kind of in that boom bust category, and the game is really important. So I don't mind taking the risk on Christian Watson in the hopes that he drops a huge game for you, a week-winning performance on Sunday Night Football to end the season. This is a game that the Packers are going to be throwing a bunch. It's a defense that is exploitable through the air. So I don't know if I really want the Packers to win because I'm not a big Packers guy. But I do think that Christian Watson could be worth throwing into a flex if you need a boom week. He's at least in a meaningful game. Same thing with the Lions players. Go ahead and start those guys up because they need a win as well. So two teams that absolutely will be starting their studs and are going to be playing some competitive football to end week 18 on a good game. I'm praying that we get that because a lot of these games, let's be honest, are not very exciting. All right, guys, so week 18 injury update show is in the books. I hope you guys won some fantasy championships. If you're still playing this week, hopefully this injury video helped you. We've done it, guys. 18 weeks in a row. I've been popping on here, going through every NFL game, giving you guys all the injury details. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who has supported me, commented, liked the channel, joined Headliner Nation with the memberships. Or just know that we appreciate you guys. It is a grind. We're not going to lie. I know Jake and Kyle have talked about it this week as well. It is a grind for all of us to put these videos out, but we do it because we want you guys to succeed. We love this community. We are excited to just keep pumping out content all off season. Don't unsubscribe just because the NFL season is over. I got all sorts of injury goodness to get you guys ahead of the game for next year so we can just be one step ahead of everybody else for our fantasy championships. But that's all I got for you guys this week. That's all I got for you guys this fantasy season. Again, thank you so much to our sponsors, Fantrax, Manscaped, Prize Picks, all those guys. We appreciate our sponsors for this year. But the doc for the last time this season is out.